Hey, YiELD Nation, welcome back to another week. We're excited. It's almost Christmas time. We've got Nate Dubs and Kirsty Omoda and myself, Jeff Starr, here talking with you guys through Zoom once again. We've done this before. We're trying it again. Thanks for watching. We're excited about what we're going to talk about today. But last week, we just want to recap. We talked about preparing for God's gift and how we need to prepare ourselves for God's gift. And that leads us straight to, once we prepare and receive a gift, what do we got to do with that gift? So Curcio, what are we talking about this week?
Man, this is very interesting. Bouncing off from last week, now heading into this week, talking about you can share God's gift with others. So now that we've received that gift from God, now it's like, all right, let's go and share. Now, when we talk about sharing, oftentimes, I don't know if this is what happens to you, but it's like, oh, we all know we have to share, but that's really a pastor's job to share. And we think that they're the ones that are equipped and qualified and trained to go ahead and share. And one of those people that comes to mind in the New Testament was like John the Baptist. Like he was born basically to pave the way for Jesus and announce the fact that he was coming and get everyone ready to receive him, right? And that's really what comes to mind sometimes when we think about, hey, we need to share God's gift with others. But I don't think that that's exactly what God is intending. Not everyone has to be a pastor or minister with the official title. Like we're all called to serve. We're all called to minister. And this is what I think the lesson is going to be pointing us to. It's going to be very interesting. So Nate, I think we have some examples of this in the Bible. So Nate, help us out. Where exactly are we going with this whole idea?
Yeah, appreciate you opening us up with that. Let's jump into the Gospel of Matthew. These are some great stories. So just if you don't have your Bible open right now, we encourage you to go grab it or open it up on your phone, whatever you are going to read it with today. But we're going to look at three stories. They happen all right in a row in the book of Matthew. And they really illustrate the idea that God's desire is for all of us to share the good things that he's done in our lives with others. And so we'll start in Matthew chapter 9, verse 18. Once again, these are just three stories. We could talk about all sorts of stories where we see the same thing taking place. But Matthew chapter 9, I'll start by reading the first story here. It says, speaking of Jesus, Matthew chapter 9, verse 18, it says, while he spoke these things to them, behold, a ruler came and worshipped him, saying, my daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. So Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. And so you see this story like, this is serious. This is such a huge, crushing existence that this guy is having, this dad whose daughter has passed away. And yet the faith is pretty strong there too. I mean, it's amazing to see this guy's faith. He said, hey, she's died, but just come. You can do something about this. It's huge faith. So Jesus starts going, and then you guys can see this here in verse 20. There's another story that all of a sudden like interrupts and hijacks this story. In verse 20 says, and suddenly a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched the hem of his garment. So someone who had this medical condition, it would have been a big deal. You guys have probably heard about how this would have made her an outcast in society because of the purity laws that culture had about not wanting to be around people who had blood. And so this lady, probably no one had probably touched her for years or didn't want to be around her because then they themselves would have to be impure for a certain amount of time. And so again, just another kind of gut-wrenching experience this lady had, just an ordinary lady. And verse 21 though says, for she had said to herself, if only I may touch his garment, talking about Jesus, I shall be made well. But Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, be of good cheer, daughter, your faith has made you well. And I just think that's incredible, right? It's just Jesus's answer here in response to this woman. He's going to raise someone from the dead, which is kind of a big deal, but he doesn't mind stopping to help someone else who's in need, which I think is just incredible. And he has such tender words for this lady, and an encouraging message too, of course. Your faith has made you well.
And she would have been labeled a sinner. She would have been labeled not just like unclean, like labeled as you're brought that upon yourself. And I think it's awesome how she just wants to be around Jesus. Like that's all she needs, like just to touch. And Jesus takes time to be with her. I think Jesus constantly gives us more than what we ask for. I mean, it says that in Ephesians, that infinitely more than we can think or dream, God will give us. And I think this woman is just there for for healing, and she gets acceptance and healing and forgiveness. Really, it's an awesome story.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. It's like Jesus doesn't just see this lady as a problem to be fixed. He sees her as a person. That's kind of what you're saying. She gets acceptance as well. And so it's an awesome story. So that's kind of a complete story right there. It's in the middle of our first story. But story number 2 is this lady gets healed and she continues on her way. Then we jump back into the first story that hasn't finished yet. So it continues on in verse 23. When Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the noisy crowd wailing. Can you guys comment on that? What's going on there?
Sounds like a funeral to me.
Funeral, right?
So at least their funerals back in the day. And of course, this widow had just lost her son. And for those of you who know, widows, they're already kind of outcasts as well. They lost their husbands, which are normally the ones who care for the family and what have you. And now she lost the one who could potentially care for her when she gets older and can take care of herself, right? And she's suffering. And here the Lord stops yet again. I mean, earlier, like we started in verse 18 of chapter 9, but at the beginning of chapter 9, God heals a paralyzed guy. So like the word is just like spreading like wildfire about what Jesus is doing right now. And he gets, fast forward down, he's on his way to see, to heal this man's daughter who is sick and dying. And then he gets stopped by the woman with the issue of blood, but that didn't matter. He took time for her. And then he was moved to compassion when he sees that this widow lost her son. And he goes and he heals. He resurrects this kid. Like him asking, like, hey, why are you guys mourning? Badao, here is the gift for you. And I'm just like, Jesus is just so amazing.
He's incredible. Yeah, he makes it to this ruler's house. He sees what's going on there. There's the flute players, the noisy crowd. Verse 24, then he said, hey, make room, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. And they ridiculed him. And you can imagine why. I've been in a situation where I've seen a funeral and someone felt like they should go in and try to raise the person from the dead. And it's just like, oh, you're not Jesus. Please don't.
Wait, I want to pause that for a second. You've actually seen this happen.
Well, not this happen. I've seen someone want to go.
No. I know what you're saying. It didn't happen. The person didn't raise, but you've seen somebody go and try.
Well, they didn't try because we talked to them about that being the individual had a history that we knew this. Please don't try to do this. This is not of God. Anyways.
That's interesting.
But it's like horrifying, like the concept of like interrupting this this tender time of what's going on. And so, verse 25, but when the crowd was put outside because the ruler and his wife said, yep, get out because I trust this guy. It says he went in, took her by the hand, and the girl rose up. I love this. Like she was raised to life. In fact, I love this story so much. I have a picture of it in my daughter's room, this idea of Jesus like lifting up a little girl and throwing her up into the air. And it says, and the report of this went out into all of the land. And we'll come back to that in just a second here. But it's again, a beautiful story. That ends story number 1, technically. We've talked about story number 2. Then story number 3, 2 blind men. It says in verse 27, when Jesus departed from there, 2 blind men followed him. I mean, people are just following him all the time. And you don't blame them. I mean, he had real power to change lives. And so they were crying out, saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he had come into the house, the blind men came to him. And Jesus said to them, do you believe that I'm able to do this? And I think that's such an important question for each of us to consider. I think that's a question that Jesus asks of us all the time. Do you think I can do this for you? And they said to him, yes, Lord. So verse 29, then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. And their eyes were opened, and Jesus sternly warned them, saying, see that no one knows it. Here's our verse. We're building up to verse 31. This kind of caps off these 3 stories, because these are stories of relatively ordinary people. There's a lady who's had a problem of bleeding. We don't know much about her, but there's someone who's identified as a ruler, so kind of like a more wealthy person. And then we have these 2 blind men, which again, we don't know very much about them at this point. They're likely beggars. So just different types of people all along. And this is what it says. Verse 31, it says, even though Jesus said, shh, be quiet, because he didn't want his ministry to be ended too soon by people like particularly the religious authorities getting upset by people claiming he was the Messiah. They couldn't hold it in. Verse 31 says, but when they had departed, they spread the news about him in all that country. And that's a sister verse of verse 26 that says, and the report of this went out to all the land. People kept talking about Jesus. 3 stories, 3 miracles, but one common theme throughout them that we want to highlight today. And that's when God did stuff in people's lives. They didn't keep it to themselves. They shared it. Even though that wasn't their main purpose, they didn't set out to become preachers or teachers. That's not necessarily what they were. They were just
naturally
people.
happened.
Yeah.
It just came out like they were told not to. I think that's so. And other times we have other stories where Jesus said, "Don't tell anybody," and they just go and tell. More people hear about it now, and it's just like this natural reaction when you're excited about something to share it. Like if you're excited about a Christmas present, you know you're going to get or you got, like you will tell people, anybody that listen. Like if they listen to you, tell them. And so the same thing is true. I think with Jesus, when we get excited about him and what he's done for us, we're going to tell somebody. We're going to share it. That's exactly what we're trying to bring out here.
Yeah. And it's really, oh, sorry, go ahead, Cursia.
No, it's all right. And I just realized something, guys. I tied in what I was studying this morning in my worship with what we're studying right now. I went way off the rails. Like the story I shared about Jesus raising the widow's son.
Widow of Nain's son.
What I was studying this morning in Luke chapter 7. So please forgive me, guys. I was like, woo.
But we let you share. We let you share.
And I appreciate that. But no. So just for those of you who are wondering, Luke chapter 7 is another great story. And what was happening there was similar, where a centurion had a servant that was ill and went to Jesus. And Jesus was making his way there. And then kind of similar stories. And I kind of blended them all, that kind of happens.
But definitely a similar theme, right? Where Jesus was doing these miracles. And that's what we were saying. These are all throughout where Jesus was healing people. And then they naturally just wanted to share with others about the good things that they had received from Jesus.
That was all planned, guys. We just wanted to see how much it is in the Bible.
Well, what I'm getting, what I think is building to in these texts that we're reading is that even if you may have some reasons why you don't feel like you can share about Jesus, you actually can, right? So get this. I'm going to tell you a statement. Then we're going to talk about these 3 quick reasons, and then we're going to wrap it up, right? But here's the idea. You are qualified. Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't care what your experience has been. I don't care what you think you can and can't do, or even if you think you're not qualified, you are qualified to share about God's goodness. We're not perfect, and God isn't looking for perfect people. And he's not saying that he wants people to be perfect before they can be qualified. He wants people who are willing, and the people who are willing are qualified to talk about Jesus and share this goodness with others, understanding that we are a work in progress, and just like we are a work in progress, they are also a work in progress. So what are some of these reasons, guys, why some people may feel like they're not qualified to share about Jesus?
You might think you're not the most Christ-like example, and I look at this like you were just talking about. We're not perfect. We're not going to be right where they are, and I look at this as if you're teaching a kid how to read. Do you tell them to just wait to practice reading until you're good at it? like don't read anything and just
say
wait.
Anything out loud.
Yeah, don't.
I don't want to hear you sounding it out.
Yeah, or wait to walk until you're good at it. Of course not. We try walking, try this, try reading, and the same thing is true for this. If we don't feel like we're good at it, we don't feel like we're Christ-like. Like you've got to just do it, and it may be like first time, second time, but just like the kid falling down, just like the kid sounding out reading, you've got to do it to improve at it. And that's what Jesus is asking us for, to just be willing and see where he takes us. And you will become Christ-like as you do it.
Yeah. And I think that's solid. And I think, one of the fears is that people are going to look at us and be like, man, I don't want to be like that person. That should maybe be the point. Like, we're not trying to make people like us. We're trying to direct them to Christ, who, we appreciate so much because we realize his love for us. But it's a real reason that I've heard people share, that it's like, I don't feel qualified to be sharing this with others. And again, it's not necessarily, how perfect we are. It's how perfect we found Christ to be in the absence of our perfection.
That's right. Another reason is we know that we don't have all the answers to people's questions. I mean, that maybe makes us feel like I'm not qualified to tell others about Jesus, because if they ask a question and I don't know what to say, I'm going to look like an idiot. right?
And it'll be
And
awkward.
or awkward. Yeah, that's another good reason that we're afraid that the conversation will turn awkward when we don't have the answers to their
I was gonna
questions.
say
But
it all kind of leads from that. Yeah.
yeah, so the idea is this though, like we don't have all the answers. Like there have been times that you guys have asked us questions and we are like, okay, let me look into that, or I
Christy
don't
didn't
know.
even get the story right.
Exactly. Like this is whole talking about the whole perfection thing. Like he doesn't want perfect people. I'm far from perfect. All right. So the idea is this, you don't have to have all the answers. All he's saying is, how about you tell them about you, what you do know about me? Because each and every one of us has had some experience with God. And the idea is the more people hear about him, the more attractive he's going to become. And that then becomes a gift to everyone else.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's so cool. A lot of times people aren't looking for perfect answers anyways, right? They're looking for a heart that cares and someone who's willing to say like, yeah, I don't maybe understand how this is, all the hows of what's going on. I just know that it's meaningful in my life, right? And I think we can resonate with this before. I don't know if you guys can think about some things that you've been super excited to share about with other people, but like I know like we get to talk and stuff like, and so I can think of like Pastor Jeff. Sometimes like you'll find like a piece of technology because we've all been scrambling trying to figure out how to do this kind of stuff. You'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. Like you guys should get the Owl video camera and stuff like that because it's really cool. And it's like, I bet that none of us understand necessarily how this thing works, but it's just like, I don't really care if I know how it works. All I want to know is someone's used it and they feel like it worked, that it works well. That's all I needed to know. And so I think it's the same with our relationship with God, right? Like we don't necessarily need to understand the mechanics all the time of it. That could be fun. You might have a mind that wants to understand that, but ultimately people just want to know, is it working for you? And I think that sometimes that brings up one of the reasons that we don't want to share our faith with people is that sometimes we feel like, if we're honest, we feel like it's not working for us. We feel like, man, I want to follow Jesus. I want to understand more of God and his love for me, but I just don't get it. Like it doesn't seem, I'm not sure if it's making a difference in my life right now. And there's not necessarily an easy answer if that's the reason that's preventing you from sharing with others. But there is something that we want to give, and that's an invitation. Like if any of you are feeling that, like the reason that's preventing me from sharing with other people is I'm not even convinced of it maybe myself, or I'm not sure if I'm tasting this and that it's tasting real sweet because I just don't get it. If that's the case, we really encourage you guys, don't continue to just hope that it works. Talk with somebody that you trust, who can be a spiritual mentor in your life, to help guide you in this, because we were never meant to navigate our faith alone, and there really are there's really more than just hope of something happening. We can definitely do things that will help us have a fuller expression of God's love in our life, and that's something that we hope for each person listening. And so there's these different reasons, and there are in some ways I guess you could say they're valid reasons that would make us afraid. But this is like the beautiful thing, right, of the Christmas season that we've been talking about here. One of the most prominent refrains that goes throughout the story of Jesus's birth is "Fear not, don't be afraid." And so we want to encourage you guys, in the midst of perhaps some reasons why we wouldn't want to share God's love with others, to focus on the reasons that you would want to share with God, share God with others, and to think about how you could do that. I just want to allow you guys, before we wrap up, any final thoughts or challenges that you'd like to share?
Yeah, let's talk about how do I do it?
Yeah.
Start with your story. You don't have to tell anybody else's story. Tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think you don't have a story, I think you need to sit down for a little bit and just reflect on the things that God has done for you. So start with your story and understand that God isn't looking for experts. He's always used ordinary people to tell the story of Jesus, right? And it's not complicated, guys. You don't have to complicate it. Just keep it simple. Tell your story and know that's all God is asking you to do.
Tell your story, and you can on top of that, I would say ask questions of the people, especially just find out where you can pray for them. Now you don't walk up to someone, where can I pray for you? No, you have friends, you talk to those friends, you listen, and you pray for those needs, and you can pray for God's guidance. Because I think when I pray, God, lead me to somebody I can share with, he does. Like he's going to, and then you're going to see it like, oh, there it is. There's where I'm supposed to share. So I think praying those prayers of just asking God, let me see it. When it's in front of me, let me see it. And then listen and tell your story. Yeah.
Well, guys, I really appreciate you taking some time to join in and talk about this with us. It's always so meaningful for us whenever you leave a comment or like the little videos here. And we just want to encourage you guys on in your faith. Please know that we're praying for you, and that God has big dreams for each of us. And part of that is to share his love with others. And so we're praying for you as that happens. With that said, we hope to see you back here next week. Until then, take care and enjoy your holiday season.